July 21st, 2014.
This episode began as a review of the Section 31 movie. So let's start over. Starting with the original series and TNG under Roddenberry and carrying on through pretty much the rest of the Berman era, Star Trek has mostly been about examining the human condition through encountering aliens, talking technobabble, and finding the humanity in every new life and new civilization, all within this really optimistic and awesome future. It was much more about big ideas than cool explosions. And while we still see a lot of this present in the current Kurtzman era, there's Discovery Season 1 and 2, pretty much any time Michael Burnham saves the galaxy, and Picard, those Abrams movies, and that movie that just came out with a little splash of Trek in it that is Section 31. Why? So join us as we have a discussion on why Star Trek needs more Star Trek stories. This is Treknicity. Welcome to Treknicity, a Star Trek podcast, where we do the deep dive on all things Star Trek. I'm your host, Patrick Murray, and with me are my co-hosts, Mike Raper and Lars DeSenza.
Hi.
What's up?
You guys are so exciting.
Oh, we're full of energy. Full.
Just thrilled.
Ding, ding, ding.
Put the headphones on. Keep talking.
Head. Oh, these things. Shit.
Yeah, the things so that my audio doesn't do weird things back at me.
Oh,
there we
yeah,
go.
I know about that. All about that. Yes, good.
Yeah, that's called, hey, let's get this started. Half an hour later, you get all your settings.
Settings. Yes.
Yeah. Yes. So in this episode, we're going to review the Star Trek Section 31 movie, but mostly to talk about why Trek has often lost its way and how it can really get back to telling Star Trek stories, not Star Trek stories.
You'll understand when we get there.
I think for me, I think the only way this could have been made any funnier is if at some point Zephram Cochrane would show up and say, "You're like a bunch of astronauts on some sort of Star Trek."
Oh God.
Roll credits.
To be fair, that was in the one of the best possible Star Trek movies. So,
yeah.
When you put in one of the best Star Trek movies, you can get away with making a bad joke and doing some sort of Star Trek.
Now, if you're listening, be aware we will spoil some aspects of Section 31.
Oh, no.
Not that it didn't spoil itself by being absolutely rotten.
Yeah.
But just in case you want to watch it without hearing any more details about it, turn this off now and come back later.
But it doesn't really matter because it's,
Yeah, I would tell you don't waste your time. But
let me give you the summary of the movie and tell me at any point when you hear something that says Star Trek other than mentioning Rachel Garrett. So we start with Georgiou, who's a bad bitch. After the titles, Section 31 sends in their discount Ethan Hunt to go collect the bad bitch, who figures everything out almost immediately. We meet the whole quirky cast and poor Starfleet Lieutenant Rachel Garrett. They get the MacGuffin, have a big fight scene. Masked guy shows up, they lose the MacGuffin. We found out the MacGuffin is some world-ending weapon made by said aforementioned bad bitch. They interrogate the guy with shit on his face, then the ship blows up. Oh no, there's a mole in our group. Some chases, some missed problem solving. We get one or two fake outs, and then they finally figure out who the mole is. Who's a mole, more chases and a transporter escape. So they also find out, oh no, they're trying to get the mirror universe to come and invade. Oh no, the Terran fleet. What are we going to do? So they get on the junk ship, chase after them. do some techno babble. They beam over while blowing some stuff up, have a fight, shit explodes. Bad bitch has reckoning with her whole past, then kicks the sword into the BBEG's throat. Big explosion, fake out death, galaxy is saved. Cut to the station where the story started. Roll the Mission Impossible theme. Dum 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 dum.
Yeah.
Da da dum. So damn dumb. So damn dumb. Kill me. Okay, that was pretty much Section 31 movie.
Yeah, it was. I thought so. You know, the purpose of this episode, we kind of want to compare, talking about how Star Trek needs more Star Trek, right? You know, so kind of old versus new, but
It had Rachel
quick.
Garrett.
Yeah, okay. It was, you know, names we know, right? This was like it was like Ocean's 11 or the Suicide Squad meet Star Trek. It was going for that quirky group of misfits off to do some underhanded mission that nobody else can do.
Yeah.
And it was awful. It had none of the charm of those other movies, of a good heist movie. It had none of that charm. The humor did not land at all.
It had Michelle Yeoh. That's, let's just say,
she was basically, she's basically the only good part of the movie. She does some scene chewing and she does pretty good, but other than that, it's terrible. You could tell it was made with series in mind. You know, by the ending, you know, that they're gonna, that they're kind of like, oh, you're going to be a team now, and you're going to go on missions, and Rachel Garrett's going to be your handler. Whatever. It was just so stupid.
Even though Section 31 is the antithesis of what Starfleet is. That's probably the worst part of this. Is now, instead of Section 31 being this questionable organization that was a foil for Bashir and the crew of DS9 to show that they still have a moral high ground compared to this monster organization. Or even in Star Trek Discovery, when they bring up Section 31, it's known, but it's this dark organization that's very, very questionable and definitely not the good guys.
Yeah, Section 31 to me is pretty much like they class it as a branch of Starfleet intelligence, and it's like you would expect Starfleet intelligence to be what Section 31 is all the time, but apparently no, they had to delineate it like specifically to say, oh no, they're not regular intelligence operatives, they're bad ones. And to me, it feels like it's become a cliche, and also I feel like it has what's the I guess MacGuffin was a good term that you used. I was going to use the Deus Ex Machina, but no.
No, it's bad bitch bomb.
The guy, they even joke about the name. There's a whole like 2-minute joke where is it God's End or Godsend? I don't hear any difference. You don't hear that? God's End, Godsend. No, I don't hear that. This goes on for like 2 minutes.
Yeah, and like we're like, who cares? Who cares? Who cares?
Yeah, it's like it's not funny, guys.
The idiotic banter works in a movie like let's borrow the Avengers, because we've got established characters who can bounce over each other and they improvise, and some of their lines are just somebody, this man's playing Galaga, we all saw it, improvised line, things like that. This is somebody trying to write funny shit and failing miserably, horribly, crashing and burning.
I think with, you know, for me, Section 31 too, you know, if you go back to, you know, where you first hear about is DS9, and it's this, it doesn't need to be explained. It doesn't need to be fleshed out. All you know is it's this shadowy organization that does hinky stuff. And at one point, they even deny that it's real, right? Ross even tries to tell Bashir that there is no Section 31. This guy's not real, blah, 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 blah. You know, that's all you needed to know. You didn't need to know that they were Ocean's 11.
Yeah.
You know, it's the Suicide Squad. Seriously, that's what it feels like. It's just, it did not need that.
Mind you, this could have theoretically worked. I'm going to say this. something to get to our larger topic. We can have these stories where we do different things in Star Trek. I mean, you look back to one of my big examples, the mirror universe was literally the way to tell stories that are not about Star Trek, because not Star Trek stories, because you can contrast them with the Star
Hmm.
Trek. You could contrast them with the horrible Terran Empire.
Hmm.
I mean, there was the entire episode where there was the Enterprise episode where they have the mirror universe episode where they get um,
There was two of them.
They get the Defiant.
yeah, they get the Defiant and they do all the horrible stuff, and it's awesome, and you get to
Hmm.
explore that. And even when you're getting into the worst, like like much of the latter seasons of DS9, where they're having to compromise their principles sometimes because of the situation, but then
Hmm.
they have to pull back because they realize we can't keep compromising our principles because otherwise we fail,
Hmm.
which is how we got Section 31.
Yeah. So, like, so if the larger topic is, how Star Trek has kind of lost its way. I mean, I would say that in some cases it feels like it has. I think. I mean, I don't know about you guys. I feel like the biggest change for me is kind of in the overall tone. If you go back to I'm going to call it the Bergman era of Trek, which, I mean,
Urban
TOS
era, yeah.
is not part of that, but
Oh,
TOS, TNG, DS9, Voyager, those shows, and Enterprise. It's a very optimistic show. Starfleet is a force for peace and diplomacy and exploration, and it's emphasizing the best in humanity, and there's morality plays and philosophical dilemmas and ethical questions to be solved, and that's that was kind of what made the show, made you want to be in that show, made you want to be in that universe, because everybody's at their best. Then along comes Discovery, where the story
brutal.
mode is what can we blow up today and watch somebody cry about it. It's just not the same. Now, I think they started to pull back to some of that with Strange New Worlds.
And even later seasons of Discovery, they get more about when they jump out of the timeline where they're causing a
Mhm.
problem. A lot of the season 3 is about them reestablishing Starfleet as this force for good in the universe,
Yeah,
and that's
yeah.
while Michael Burnham, Savior of the Galaxy, does what Michael Burnham, Savior of the Galaxy, does.
Well, and here's the thing: you talk about Star Trek losing its way. We all know that from the get go, Star Trek had been a pretty solid formula with some changes along, some bumps along the way, and some lumps in the gravy a little bit.
Season 1 TNG.
Season 3 of TOS. Um,
Hmm.
it was but again, there were some spots where it was brilliant, but at the same time, for the most part, the formula was kept the same. It was pretty consistent. It was pretty consistently good. And the reason for that is because of the creative direction was controlled largely by Gene Roddenberry himself. When he died, that basically they handed the reins off to Rick Berman,
Hmm.
who kind of wrapped up. He wrapped up TNG, and then we had DS9 start. Well, DS9 was basically the start of that slippery slope, and they had been chomping at the bit for years. They wanted to explore the dark side of Star Trek. They really wanted to see the gritty darkness of what life in the greater galaxy would be like. And Roddenberry's like, no, my story is that this is about good people doing good things for
Hmm.
good reasons,
Hmm.
and we figure out the solutions to our problems through thoughtful introspection, critical thinking, and just generally being good people. Well, of course, they're like, well, that's not really, that's not kind of consistent with humanity. And it's like, no, yes, you're right, you're absolutely right, but that's the point. This shows you a future that where we have overcome a lot of our petty differences, and we have looked forward, and the problems and the challenges we face them together. And when they started, when of course when he passed away and the creative control was handed off, um, we knew. I mean, right there, originally was Rick Berman. Then he brought in Brandon Braga, who helped him with DS9 and Voyager, and then eventually Enterprise. And it was just like it was again. It was a slippery slope. And you talked about like Section 31 as an organization. Now, the first time we saw Section 31, of course, was in DS9. However, canonically speaking, as far as where it shows up in the timeline, if you go back to season
Enterprise.
4
Enterprise.
of Enterprise,
Yeah.
Malcolm Reed apparently is a former member of Section 31.
Mhm.
And he gets roped back in. So we know that as far as an organization goes, it's been around since the early days before even the Federation was founded.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so we know that it's, I mean, they kind of shoehorned it in there. Like they had to use it as just that MacGuffin. And
It's basically the counterpoint to Starfleet's ethics. That's
Right.
the whole point of
Yeah.
Section 31.
right.
And when used that way, it works well because it contrasts. Because probably one of the constraints that Roddenberry created was he really said you can't have interpersonal conflict on a starship. Things like that basically limited what they could do with storytelling and limited how they could play with morality.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
and I want to really call bullshit on that concept, really, because I mean, we saw it plain as day. Episode Balance of Terror. You
Mhm.
know, when they're sitting there and they're looking at, they're kind of like, oh yeah, my family were killed by Romulans during the Romulan War and blah blah blah, and there's like the mild case of racism, and
Yeah.
then suddenly when they find out that the Romulans and the Vulcans share a common ancestry, they just crank that up to 11, and
Yeah.
and that
Yeah. Actually, I'll clarify. Roddenberry instituted that more for TNG.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. The original series, they would play it a little faster and looser with that. But for TNG, they really ramped up we can't have the crew fighting with each other.
Yeah. He didn't have a problem with conflict. He didn't want the crew having interpersonal conflict. Everybody was supposed to get along.
right.
And
Maybe
which I
mild
thought was,
disagreement.
and I thought that was stupid because, well, I don't want to say stupid, but
Sometimes
one of the aspects of the original show that everybody remembers and worked so well was that Spock and McCoy would argue. Now
Oh
they
yeah.
respected each other, and they would take a hit for each other, but they disagreed all the time, and that made that relationship work.
Right.
You know,
And they had disagreements in TNG, but you couldn't have anything escalate to where crew members could get into a fight for any reason.
yeah,
And it does limit your ability to tell a story to we have this guest character that comes in and they're the ones that
yeah,
do the bad thing so that our crew can be saints.
yeah,
Being able
and
to have a crew occasionally cross a line, like Cisco letting Garrick do some assassination.
Or
Yeah.
and when
I'm drawing a blank on the episode name, but yeah.
when they're talking
in the
about
pale moonlight,
and the
Yeah.
and the Romulans basically being letting the Romulans die because they knew that when they scan the wreckage, they're going to find the data recorder and they're going to find out it's fake. Then they're going to think it was Dominion planted, and that's going to draw them in. So they, I mean, again, they've explored
The ends justified the means in that situation, and
Mhm.
Cisco knew it and knew he crossed a line.
well, even even Garrick at some point even tells him, "That's why you came to me, because I would do the things that you wouldn't do."
Yeah. And that was the
So
genius of, say, DS9, where you could where even with the edge of genes, Starfleet crew doesn't generally fight with each other. You could have these non-Starfleet people just throwing shit in things
mhm,
constantly.
yeah,
But yeah, then
um,
we get to Discovery, the first 2 seasons especially. A lot of Picard is all about disillusionment and fighting and
mhm,
a bleak future,
Hmm.
and
yeah,
Starfleet not living up to Starfleet at all. Especially season 1 was bad. Season 2 was
Mhm.
Yay, they brought back the Borg. And season 3 was, yay, they brought back the Borg again. Spoiler
Yeah.
alert.
Well, I think another thing that I don't know about you guys, I kind of picked up on, or something I thought about when I was preparing for this. If you watch the older shows, again, up through Voyager and Enterprise, the depiction of Starfleet officers is that they're hyper professional. They're all athletes and scholars and brilliant in their field. They are just like the very best of the best. Then you get into some of this new stuff, like, no, not so much. They're not professional. They don't get me wrong, I'm not a prude, but they swear, they argue, they cry. And I'm like, where did this come from? They didn't do this kind of thing. Even, like TNG, especially, everybody was like super professional all the time, except every once in a while Worf would do something he wasn't supposed to.
Well, that's because he had to run in and get his ass kicked so we could see how powerful threat.
Yeah,
Oh no, Worf got his ass kicked by something. Oh no,
Yeah.
this must be terrible.
Yeah.
Worf gets to show how the
Every
monster works.
other episode. Yeah. Oh no, barrels fell on him. Now he's paralyzed.
Yeah. So that was something that I really I picked up on a lot. That was a noticeable change.
Maybe Worf should have gone down instead of Tasha Yar, because then he'd be like, "Oh, I just got my ass kicked again. ARS. But no, Denise Crosby won it out. Oh,
but it does bring up a good point, and that is, when you look at how it was when we were watching the older stuff in first run, it aligned a lot with our thoughts or how we were seeing the world at the time. So it kind of made sense to us, and now it makes more sense because it's kind of formed part of our core memories. And when you look at it now, you're like, man, like, why are they doing this shit? Why are they doing this? Like, why is it like this? Like, why do we have all these horribly flawed characters? Why is it that we're, back then we're seeing an idealized version of humanity. Now we're seeing like COVID humanity. It's like, I'm surprised. I'm really surprised that they weren't like hoarding shit on Discovery, because, they're in the middle of a war. With a militarily speaking superior enemy,
and a bad guy running the ship.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So, don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm certainly not opposed to seeing characters that are grittier, edgier, more like people are today. But at the same point, that is the freaking point about Star Trek. Is it's supposed to show us a future better than we have now. Yeah. I mean, you have to ask yourself the philosophical questions. What would humanity be like today if suddenly we were visited upon by an alien race who could, within 50 years, do away with hunger, disease, I did say hunger, and environmental disasters. Imagine if the most basic things in life were able to be provided for free. This whole post-scarcity society mentality.
50-50, half the population wants to start a war with them, but that's beside the point.
Well, that's true.
And that's our current.
But that's
I don't want to get too much into politics on this one.
But you're right, and you're right, and the reason why I brought this up is because even though it's a comedy, South Park did a really good, poking fun at this very concept, and that is when Cartman goes into the future, and there are basically these two factions of humanity that are fighting each other, and then they're all fighting the otters. They had, by this time, he's like 500 years in the future.
Buck Rogers style?
Yep, including the wonderful Buck Rogers style opening sequence for those episodes. But the point is that this far in the future, humanity has broken the bonds of its of religion, of organized religion. Religion, period, full stop. But they found something else to fight about. Now they're fighting about whose science is better. Well, I mean, what would happen today? Well, what would happen to us if Vulcans came down here and said, "Look, here's technology to cure all your diseases, to allow you to feed everybody without limit." Could you imagine the chaos it would? I mean, the absolute
Yeah.
chaos, because the reason why Star Trek is so appealing to us is because it represents something we all want, but we all refuse to work towards.
Yeah. I will go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say what you're describing. I think that question, there's actually an episode of The Orville that answers it very well, where the girl from the planet that runs on social media,
I remember that.
She asked to go with them. She's like, I hate it here. I want to go with you. And she's like looking at the replicator things, and she's like, you could save whole planets with this. Why don't you? And Kelly shows her a planet that's been destroyed. She said they did give them that, and they fought over it, and people tried to control it and make money off of it, and they killed each other. I think that's exactly what would happen.
Do you remember?
I hate to say that's what would happen.
Do you remember the original series episode? I think it was a piece of the action. That's the one where they go down and they find out it's a gangster planet, basically.
Gangster book.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, same concept. Now I know it's not canon, so don't come at me, folks. But it was a really interesting concept in the video game Star Trek 25th Anniversary. You actually, as one of your missions, you go back to that planet, and they find out that the planet is absolutely laid waste. It's complete wasteland. It's because what happened is somebody left a communicator behind.
Boy left his communicator behind. Yeah,
and somebody
the universal translator. They found it. Yeah,
that's right. And they were able to reverse engineer it and make geometric, or exponentially large advances in technology to the point where they annihilated themselves. So, and I understand. Forgive me. I know
that's what the Prime Directive is all about.
Yeah, and that was part of it. But I know we kind of strayed a little bit off topic on this one because we mostly wanted to talk about why Star Trek needs more Star Trek, and it's because of, look, it's okay to tell these kinds of stories. It's okay to tell stories where you see the consequences of, sometimes the great actions or the great meaning actions they take have unintended consequences, and that's fine. That's a good storytelling, even to the point where I had written when I was putting together my STA campaign, the first mission that I wrote is called Second First Contact, and it's where the crew goes back to the planet where they meet the Edo again. Now, everybody knows anybody who watched TNG season 1 knows that planet is where Wesley Crusher falls into the plants and they try to kill him. Okay. Well,
everybody's running around almost with clothes ready to fall off and have sex every second.
I know,
because Gene Roddenberry wanted that one.
How could that be a bad thing? But the whole point is that they were going to go back. They go back and they realize that influence of them showing up had unintended disastrous results. That's what I mean. That to me, that is a good story. That's a good way to look at stories, and it's a good way to use conflict to teach an important lesson. What we're seeing now, with the exception, I will say, of probably Lower Decks, Strange New Worlds, and maybe to some degree Prodigy, we're seeing the stories come together in ways that it's like they just had to say, you know what, let's go ahead and tell this story we've been wanting to tell for a while, but we're going to set it in the Star Trek universe because that's what we've got. That's all we've got. So we're not going to worry about telling a good Star Trek story. We're going to worry about telling a story set in a Star Trek universe, and that's what we got. Yep. Section 31. We got all 3 of the Kelvin timeline movies. Same thing. Sorry, two.
The one with Pseudocon doesn't exist.
Yeah,
but the point is that they focused more.
Oh, it also has a Section 31 situation.
It does,
and shitty giant and uglier giant Enterprise.
They focused more on telling a story not necessarily a good Star Trek story. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I agree. And I was thinking something along the same lines as what you're saying is to me, if you look at, I want Star Trek is not as a property, it is not a universe, and it is not technology, it is not a spaceship and uniforms and Starfleet, it's not these things. It's the philosophy that sold it. It's this idea of humanity at its best. We've left all of these bad things behind, even from the original show. It's a stupid episode, but Abraham Lincoln shows up on the Enterprise and he calls Uhura, quote unquote, charming negress. And he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that." And she's like, "Why? We don't let things like that bother us anymore." And he's like, "I'm sorry, I thought offense was given when it wasn't." I was like, that is Star Trek to me. That
Yeah.
philosophy, taking that universe and then saying, let's go blow things up and do lots of action and cool destruction stuff. That's not Star Trek. I'm sorry, it's not.
To be fair, we're not opposed to some stuff blowing up now and then.
No.
Otherwise, you don't
No,
have.
of course not.
Yeah, we got to have some stuff explode. But I'm going to take the penultimate episode of Lower Decks is a perfect example. We have William Boimler, who's all bummed out because he's jumping, and we're ripping on the fact the problems with multiverse stories. And it's Lily Sloan from another universe that explains why they explore how humanity is, why they get to see different versions of themselves and learn how people are and learn different and better ways sometimes. And they're exploring humanity through their traveling through the multiverse. And then and at that point you see his eyes just widen and he gets that childlike innocent look that we know Boimler, any version of Boimler, for on his face. And that's Boimler. That story is so Star Trek. I mean,
right.
it starts with we're chasing, shooting, blowing up stuff, but now we get the answer, and the answer's good.
Well, and here's the thing: the last thing I really want to say about the topic is I actually want to, and this goes back to my last point about telling a good story and telling a good Star Trek story. One of my biggest beefs with Section 31 was the characters of Fuzz and Wisp. And Fuzz, of course, is the Vulcan with bangs, the Vulcan robot with bangs, controlled by the mini guy. Okay.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert: he's the mole.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, look, it would have been a funnier and more interesting mole if they had brought Fred Savage in from Austin Powers and Goldmember, because he was the mole. He had the giant mole. But the thing is that Sven Roykrodt did what he could, did the best he could with what he had. But the point is that why would you be okay with a character, being portrayed in such a way that is so, absolutely so left field from what we have seen of members of this race? I mean, I can understand if he was just emotional. We've seen that with Cybok. Okay, we've seen it.
And T'Lyn, don't forget, T'Lyn was overly emotional all the time.
We saw it in Enterprise. There was a whole group of them.
Yes,
right.
So we understand that these people exist, but the fact is, the guy had, and I was like, I want to give an absolute, well-round of applause to Sean Fenrick, from Trek Culture, who made a really good point that character would have been fixed.
Yeah.
If they had just given Sven a dialect coach, But at the same point, I really wish they wouldn't have had him as this thick Irish brogue, to the point where, and I said it to you guys, watching this movie, every time he spoke, all I could think of was, and all I could hear in my head was, "They're after me, Lucky Charms."
Mm-hmm.
I was like, "Oh God, please stop, stop! It's dead already."
I think that's what we did, which is why, I think that's pretty much what we did with this movie.
Right.
Was
Well, I mean, back to this movie. I mean, the problem is that the tone was just totally borked, because there's two ways you can do a heist movie, right? You can make it ultra serious. Let's take Rogue One from Star Wars, right? That is essentially a heist movie.
Yeah.
Super serious the whole way through. You got a few moments of levity through mostly the robot, but it is a serious movie. Or you can make them like really funny, where you just go all in on the humor. You cannot mix both. You can't have the wacky Suicide Squad humor in a serious tone movie. You can't do it. They tried to do it here with a Star Trek overlay, and it just fell flat.
Yeah, it didn't feel Star Trek. I heard a couple sound effects. Michelle Yeoh was awesome. Some of the other actors did a decent job. Poor girl playing Rachel Garrett got the short end. She had to portray a really cool character that got completely okay. I'll be the awkward Starfleet nerd.
Yeah. I'm gonna show you something real quick because we didn't really get. There really wasn't a chance to
You
bring.
forgot to put that up, didn't you?
No,
We even got a
I
got a slide up for the show and everything.
Yeah. So my final review of the Star Trek 31 Section 31 movie is this.
Yep, dumpster fire.
Yes. Yeah, I don't think we can end it better than that. We need better Star Trek than Section 31.
Agreed.
Yeah,
So,
I would love to see a return to some of those values and philosophies of the original shows. I think sometimes I think Strange New Worlds hits some of it. Sometimes they don't. I'm ex-military. Most of you guys that listen to know that there are parts of that show that just make me grit my teeth. One of them in particular, when Spock is in command and he gives the order to go to warp, and Ortega's like, "Say the thing. You got to say the thing." I'm like, "Shut the fuck up. You do not talk like no. That is not how you talk to the captain ever." It's like, it's not funny. Don't do that. I want to get back to kind of the professionalism of the way that they used to be in those great moral quandary episodes. And they have some good ones in the show, don't get me wrong, but those were what really sold it. That those good philosophical discussions, long bits of dialogue where they didn't have the effects budget, so you had to talk more. There was more emphasis on the writing. That's kind of what I want to get back to.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Anything else you want there? Anything else you want to see in Star Trek?
I just want to see again a return to a more balanced, character-driven sort of stories.
Yeah, I also want more Lower Decks, but that's just me.
You want more three-breasted cat women?
Three-breasted cat women. Klingon, full frontal Klingon nudity, 2 dicks. Yeah, whatever. It works. I'm surprised you haven't thrown the slide up.
I was going to say, go ahead.
Now that we've shared our thoughts, now that we've shared our thoughts on the whole Star Trek situation and the Section 31 Star Trek movie, let us know what you think. Did we get it right, or is there more to discuss about the dumpster fire?
And if you want to write to us.
Oh, it's Cupid and everything. I'm making fun of you now for forgetting that.
I totally left it in there. Oh, well, that's
Who
fine.
cares?
Yeah.
To be fair, Section 31 does not deserve it.
No. But if you want to write to us, or if you've gotten any thoughts about this question, what does Star Trek mean to you? Write to us and tell us. We'd love to hear it.
Yes. And thank you for joining us here on Treknicity, where we do the deep dive on all things Star Trek. I'm your host, Patrick Murray, and with me are Lars DeSenza and Mike Raper. Be sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel at Treknicity.com, as well as visiting all of our socials here. Find us on your favorite podcast service, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and Amazon Music. And if you have any ideas or you want to tell us what you think Star Trek should really be, hit us up at show@Treknicity.com. Hit us up on the socials. Join the Red Shirt Geeks Discord server. We've got all kinds of possibility.
Oh, yeah.
And as always, rock out with your Spock out. See you next time.